Hey, Justin. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your time with us and the rest of the community to talk a bit
Yeah.
about your experiences.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Awesome.
Absolutely very exciting.
Yeah, because it's going to be slightly different. Most of the interviews we've had were about through hiking, and a lot about hiking different trails. But you're taking it a bit differently. You're more into the high alpine mountaineering stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and how your interest in mountaineering came about?
Yeah. So my name's Justin LaFranco. I live here in New Braunfels, Texas, which is about 45 minutes south of Boston, about 30 minutes north of San Antonio. So just kind of right in between these two really cool cities. Originally from California. So about 7 years ago, I quit my career in U.S. politics and moved back to California where I grew up and moved in with my parents, like all successful 29-year-olds. So moved in with them and I started a company, a media company specifically focused around the sport and and CrossFit as a fitness and as a community. I had already been doing CrossFit for 5+ years at that point. And so, with a little bit more free time on my hand, I was always really in love with the outdoors. So I spent a little bit more time hiking and backpacking, camping overnight, out on the trails in Southern California. And I had a friend from my time in DC that I saw posting to Facebook about, using ropes and, you know, uh, carabiners and other things like that. And I was like, whoa, what's going on over there? And so I reached out to her and I said, wow, I've been getting into a lot of outdoor stuff lately. And let me know the next time you go on a climb. I'd be really interested in learning more about this. And we knew each other from CrossFit. So, she knew I was in for the suffering of climbing mountains and was at least, had been indoctrinated into that kind of pain. And so one time she was planning and organizing a trip for some other climbing friends up in the Pacific Northwest to climb El Dorado. Classic 100 classics alpine climb up in the North Cascade mountain range in Washington State. And I came along for the ride. I had had a couple of hikes. I had more than a couple of hikes, but a good number of hikes under my belt. This was a totally different experience. It's a glacial crossing. It's like this knife ridge, like the summit blocks on this knife ridge, and you're up ice axe and crampons on. You're on a rope team and everything like that. You're sleeping up on the snow and everything. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And that was fun. And as I was just kind of processing it and everything, yeah, I've met a couple of really cool people on that climb that I still climb with today. And they were itching to get another climb out. We got each other's numbers, and eventually we started climbing more and more together. So it just kind of unfolded through making a massive career change that took me out of the center of the political world in the East Coast back to my home base of California, where I had a lot more proximity to mountains and to the outdoors. Even if they weren't that style of climbing, it was still that ability to get out there and drive 90 minutes and be up at 7 or 8 thousand feet, so that's, anywhere from 2 to 3,500 meters at that point, and just at least getting a chance to be outdoors and then having a friend that introduced me to it. And then the rest is kind of history. And that was 5 years ago, a little more than 5 years ago now that I started doing actually climbs.
Yeah, nice.
Perfect.
Now, so then from there it transitioned. Do you then now are you more focused and spend your time on the mountaineering side of things, or are you still more into the CrossFit as a business, but spare time is mainly focused?
Yeah, so business absolutely still very much focused on running the company and definitely still talking, eating, sleeping, breathing CrossFit, from a professional side of things. And on my personal side, it's a great all CrossFit trainers and coaches and gym owners will tell you that CrossFit's a great GPP program. So it's a general physical preparedness program, and that will fundamentally make you as prepared as possible to do most any task. So, if you do have interest in running, and you may just not want to run all the time, CrossFit's a great way to stay in shape and then branch off and do other disciplines. So for me in climbing, I still love CrossFit. I just came from CrossFit. I was just in the gym, showered, and then got ready for this. And so that is what, like, I maintain my fitness level, that's required. And while through hiking, backpacking, different types of camping, day hikes, overnight hikes, multi-days, alpine, mountaineering, snow, not snow, rock, they're all very physically challenging in different ways. And so I always tell people, like, oh, how do you train for mountains? I'm like, well, I do CrossFit because I can basically climb any mountain on any given day of the week, because I stay so physically active and so fit. And there's a mental side of training that helps you prepare for long, tough objectives. So I still do a ton of, it's all my free time, I still spend working out. But when we get ready for bigger climbs, harder climbs, longer climbs, and I do start dialing up more of that, you'd call it like sports specific training. So, if I'm going to go, I'm in great shape to do a triathlon, but if I'm not spending any time doing any swimming, I'm going to get eaten alive when it comes to an open water swim, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to the alpine, I do spend a lot more time doing long grunt workouts that are hour plus long, I'll do a lot more running, step ups, weighted step ups, sled drags, heavy kind of brutal type workouts, or I'll just go for like 10-mile ruck runs or something, things that are emulating that kind of stimulus that are putting you there. So, but my my love of CrossFit is probably rivaled with my love for climbing, but you just can't do it all year.
No.
Not unless if you're a pro and you're flying around the world to chase the different seasons, and that's just not really reality for me. But I still probably climb. I would say I make 4 to 6 attempts on mountains a year. So that's not a small amount of climbs. And sometimes we'll stack them in the same trip. So we'll go after 2 summits in the same trip. Sometimes, if you're going to fly all the way out there, you take a week off, it's 4 days to climb. If you're going to fly out to Rainier, you can kind of fly out in 3 days and get it all done. But like, if you just tacked on maybe like a couple more days, you might as well take the whole week off, and you can get one more mountain in there, something like that. It's usually how we.
Nice. And how did you train for the technical aspect? Because you mentioned that you tag along with a trip with a friend, but how? Because it's very technical mountaineering as well. You have to literally learn the ropes. So how did you manage that?
Well, this is probably an accurate answer that reflects many people's upbringing in mountaineering, but I'm not going to speak for everybody, but it's just my assumption that I definitely did some things that you were not supposed to do. So,
yeah.
And I think it mirrors many people's experiences in the mountain, where you're like, you don't always have a, what would you call, like a mentor who really is showing you literally the ropes as you're going. If you do have one, that's great. I have some friends that are far more experienced than I am that I climb with. And through our collective wisdom, we're able to make sound and good judgment calls when it comes to things. But when it comes to learning things, education is all around you. Education is something that you can access, but there's nothing can replace what it's like to try and place a quick draw under tension while holding on to something, while you're freezing, while wind is up, right? You got to do it. I could set something up in the brick back here and work on, different anchor knots. I could do all kinds of different things in this environment, but you just have to go climb. You're not going to be able to replace that. And so I research a lot. We spend a ton of time on, practicing and learning core mountaineering skills. So, your hitches, your friction hitches, your knots, how to rig up your harness for snow travel, for glacier travel. Not that different between both of those. And you begin to add skills on. Each new climb presents new problems. Each new climb presents new knowledge that you have to do. And the same climb, frankly, might actually involve different education that you need for different times of the year or under circumstances. Could be colder, could be icier, could be a different route, could be the same route in different circumstances. So knowledge is very cumulative. And by staying, and my advice for younger climbers is, if you do like it and you do decide that this is something that you're interested in, number one, find a group of friends that like it too, and that are motivated similar to you are. And that's probably the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Number two, there are plenty of courses that you can sign up for. Climbing is not a cheap sport. And if you don't live in an area like the Pacific Northwest or parts of California with the Sierras or parts of Colorado, you're going to have a harder time accessing the mountains regularly. So a course is probably a good option for you.
Yeah.
Sign up with Alpine Ascents, RMI, American Alpine Institute, or a place in your own locale if you're international, and there's plenty of them that will teach you basic snow skills. And outside of that, it's just about doing it. The world of the outdoors is meant to be experienced. It's not conquered. It's not, it's an ever-changing, constantly living and breathing environment that can teach you a lot of things. And even if it's as lame as snowshoeing 6 miles through the snow, you will learn a lot along the way about pacing, about how much your hip flexors blow up more than you thought that they could, what load can do to snow, and how frustrating it is to walk through manzanitas covered in snow that are going to eat you alive that whole way there and back again. So I always tell people it's great to just go out and explore things. Everybody wants to get to the summit, but spending time in the outdoors is part of the journey. And that's probably, for me, that's the most fun part. So I've been blessed to have some friends that are equally motivated as I am to train hard and to climb hard. And they're really committed to the climbs as well. So, they're organized and they're knowledgeable, and they've shown me a lot of things along the way. I took a course a couple of years ago to help kind of up some of the, what we consider to be more like real technical skills. And then it's just constantly learning new things. You can go to the bouldering gym and learn about rock climbing. You don't need to be harnessed in to learn about what it's like to make moves in difficult and challenging environments and stuff. It's a constantly changing game, and there's plenty of knowledge to be learned out there, but the best knowledge, best teacher is the wilderness. And so I'd encourage people always just, hey, try it out there. Nothing stopped me from booking a plane flight. I mean, I climbed my first mountain by myself. Wasn't a smart idea, but I did it. And you could do it too. And it's not too hard to find a guide either if you're willing to pay for it. That'll take you up on a cool objective as well. And they'll teach you, and ask a lot of questions. That's the most important thing. Ask a lot of questions, and don't assume that you always know the right answer. Be a teachable person.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I've amassed knowledge over the years. And now there's great cinema out there. It's not so much cinema is a little more about the culture than the technical side of things, but that's okay. And at least helps you get through the winter months when you're not doing anything.
No, true. Yeah. It's interesting because that's definitely also a lot of life lessons in there. I think that translates to life in general. I mean, the journey is one of those for sure. If you just reach the top, only go for the top, and that's so brief. So you might as well enjoy the journey for sure. You mentioned that there's guides out there. Do you generally just climb with your group, or do you tend to have a local guide as well?
I have never done a guide. I take that back. We had a failed attempt at North Sister, and we were basically climbing through a blizzard with guides, and we didn't know the route and we didn't know the conditions whatsoever. So we basically couldn't change the date. So we just went up and messed around on the mountain for a little while because we already paid for it. But that was the only time I've ever climbed guided. So I've always been self-guided. And nothing wrong with guiding, nothing wrong with hiring guides at all. Just personal choice I personally want to work through the problem. That's how I like to climb. And there's some times when you maybe want to do something that is you don't have anybody on your team that can really help make it a successful and safe climb, and I think that's an appropriate use of the guides. But usually I try and work it through, and amass the skills to set that goal. Not that guiding can take away from your learning experience, but sometimes sometimes you can have an over reliance on it, and you're just like, well, it's cool. you may never have been able to get that route if you hadn't used a guide. And so I think that's an appropriate use case of it. But for some others that just don't have climbing groups, it's really the only option. So I don't hate on it whatsoever. I just personally, I want to learn, and that's part of the adventure for me is taking on that challenge and working through the problem and not relying on others, relying on a team and to get through and to do that, because learning those skills is really what sets you up for big challenges and big objectives. Even if you're even through hiking is an example where, it's not necessarily, summiting mountains, but you are coming across challenges on a daily, hourly basis that you have to work through. No one will guide you through that. No one will be able to tell you all the right answers because no one's experienced every scenario that's out there. And so you learn those skills, and that allows you and sets you up for having the problem solving mentality that comes with climbing. And it also sets you up for realizing when your objectives are beyond your skill set. It forces you to learn skills that are necessary for the climbs, and there's so much more interest in climbing today. There's so much that's going on in media and cinema, which is fantastic. I was watching an episode during the break. I just needed a few minutes, and I put on the new series that Jimmy Chin has put together on Disney Plus. And I'm like, was none of this stuff 3 years ago. And after Free Solo came out, it was this cascade of new cinema and either short and long form versions of it. And I'm like, this is fantastic. So, it's a really cool time in climbing. But with that comes the kind of big mountain next to big metropolitan area effect, which is lots of people want to climb it. 50% of them shouldn't be on the mountain. And so that's always a challenge that comes out. And, working through problems and learning when you're over your head is an important skill in the mountains, because learning when you need to learn new skills is very important rather than just getting to the top. And so it's a bit of a mindset shift, but personally, I try not to use guides unless, and my sort of threshold is if I really want to climb something and nobody will go with me or nobody else can do the route, then I personally would hire a guide. And then there's when guides are required in certain countries. So you don't have a choice. Like, okay, well, hey, whatever. I'm like, but you don't need to boil my water. Like, I got this. Like, this is not, I don't, you can just walk with me. How about we do this together? Like, not necessary. But I haven't been in one of those environments yet. I will be soon, but I haven't climbed internationally yet. So I'll let you guys know how that experience is on my next go around.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
You mentioned working through the problems. So I guess you do a lot of working through the problems before you actually set foot on the climb itself. How much time do you put in your prep work?
Well, obviously, the bigger the climb, the more preparation. But I probably start packing 2 or 3 weeks before I leave. I pack my bag probably twice, and so it's obviously number one, weather. You won't know the weather 2 weeks out anyway, so you kind of know your favorites and your go-tos, that you're always going to pick out and stuff, and then you have a general idea of what to expect given the time of year and the mountain you're climbing and stuff. But then you might refine it further later on. But I like to get everything organized and know exactly what I'm looking at. Like, okay, well, how much stuff do I want to bring? What's my weight considerations? What are my food considerations? I do food last, but I finish food last, but I start doing food weeks in advance, especially for anything that's more complicated or over 2 days. I'm like weight saving or just meal prepping and looking at calories and how much food. And I've gotten it down pretty well where I can judge, like, okay. Then I pack everything into my Alpine bag and I'm like, all right, is this too heavy, too light, too heavy, too light? Like, how do I feel about this? Everything, like, can I shave anything off? And then I let it just sit. And then maybe 5 or 6 days before I go final pack. And from there, I'm pretty much set at that point, because weather, it's not really going to change one jacket or another jacket. If we don't see a storm in the system, then and we're go, and we know what we're getting ourselves into. So that's a lot of preparation. I think like people underestimate like how much goes into packing, because there's some things that like I don't like having to go to REI when I land or spend any more money at this point, because like I have thousands of dollars in climbing gear at this stage. So like, you really don't need another thing, like, and I'd hate to have to buy like $200 because I forgot my sleeping pad, or something comical like that, which has happened to all of us. And then it's the technical and route research. So part of it is like, do I know where I'm going? Like, okay, what do I need to know about this route that's different? And then what do we need from a technical side? So if it's rock, it's what rock protection do you need? And so that's a part of the packing experience. It's like, what technical gear do you need? Because like, obviously if we're flying, like, you don't bring like your entire rack with you. Like you always bring some extras of something, depending on what it is, but like, I don't bring like 6 axes with me, because like I'm just, you just know which one you want, and which one you think is the good one to get the job done and stuff. So, I started looking at all the technical stuff and being like, okay, what kind of protection do I want for personal or team protection, and, stuff like that. And you just kind of start whittling it down. And then it just goes into understanding the route, understanding the challenges and complications of it, kind of like, and I really start thinking about it and trying to watch videos. So my process usually looks like a lot of trip reports or blogs or sites, summit posts or mountain project or something, if anything's up there, and then YouTube videos to see if there's any like great like YouTube research that's gone on from people, helmet cams or something like that. But we're climbing a lot of classic routes that are done. They're not obscure. These are ones that people have climbed, dozens of hundreds and hundreds of times, and they get a lot of sends a year. So there tends to be reliable stuff. And then, and for anybody else that's out there, like there's some good Facebook groups that you can join, that, especially for high active areas, like PNW Mountaineering, I think, is a Facebook group, but that's just one of dozens that exist. I'm sure Colorado and the Sierras have some, and Mammoth area might have one, and all this other kind of stuff that these are, obviously West Coast California type things, and and on to different areas like Ouray if you're in ice climbing, or Bozeman if you're in ice climbing up in Montana area. Join those, because you can ask a lot of questions for people that have been up, because a lot of people just don't write trip reports anymore, but they'll do them in forums, and they'll talk about snow conditions and route finding issues or AVI danger or anything else that's going on like that. And that's a growing and valuable resource that I've found for people that are active in the community, that are posting about these things and stuff. Also gives you great ideas and photos, and people like, hey, anybody got photos from Forbidden Peak or Fisher's Chimneys on Shuckson, I was just up there last week, here's a picture of this part, and you're like, oh man, it's brilliant, right? Like you're getting, and so that's really where but here's the thing, unlike rock, snow routes change daily. So you're like, okay, the easy way to look at it is go to Google image search and look at like, I don't know, Mount Rainier routes, and look for the highlighter, painting on one, and be like, that's like a general approximation of which way you're going, because like every day something changes on these mountains, and snow, one year it's here, one year it's over here. I mean, there could be like 20 meters difference in like the direction that you're going to take, because snow just does that. So that's also the fun thing that I like about climbing, is that it's never the same. No day's the same. The snow's constantly changing, shifting, and variations. And so you get to kind of figure it out on your own. You're like, well, is it this way or this way? You're like, well, it's kind of this way, like I've taken other people with me, and they're like, which way are we going? We're like, well, it's kind of like, it's up here, but like, we're going that way, so it's, I don't know. I mean, we're just going up. Like, well, can we stay on trail? Like, there's no trail, it's done. So like, it's not a thing anymore. And that's kind of the fun part of it too. I think, people always ask me like, hey, what's the difference between hiking and climbing? I'm like, well, hiking is everything that happens on the trail, and climbing is everything that happens after, when the trail ends. Because like, it's now no longer obvious. It's no longer defined for you which direction to go, which requires you to have some knowledge. Requires you to make decisions. To hike requires no decisions except when to stop and when to start again. You just have to go straight. I've got my start in hiking. I love hiking. I still do it, but people always ask for a definition. I'm like, well, when the trail ends and you have to start making decisions for yourself about which way to go, now you're climbing. I don't care if it's on snow or on rock or gravel, scree, all this stuff is the same. It's now up to you to decide how to get to the top. And now you're climbing. Congratulations. So
Nice.
And you also mentioned that, of course, with the snow, it changes so much. So there's, for example, you climb Denali as well. So there's like only a short period where you can actually climb. So how do you make the decision timing wise, like when in the season you climb a route or a mountain?
Well, with Denali, everything goes up by a factor of 10. And so if you're talking about preparation, like my climb in May 15th, we started foot on the mountain, I think was about May 15th. I started prepping in January for that climb. So that is a heck of a step up in preparation because 21 days of food is packed individually day by day and calorie counted in before you even leave your house on the way to Denali. So that's a lot of preparation. But on the mountain, making assessments about decisions is we're having a strong group, especially if you're going self-guided like we did, where a strong group of decision makers is really important. You have weather considerations, you have physical considerations, you have any route danger to analyze and discuss. You have weather windows. So, it's not just about what you do tomorrow. Sometimes it's about what you need to do over the next 2 days and whether you have enough time to do it, or 3 days. And do you have to have enough time to do it? Especially when you start getting to summit pushes and such. It's not like, can you move to the next camp in 1 day? It's like, no, can you move to the next camp and not get stuck in a blizzard there for 3 days?
Yeah.
You have enough time to go to the summit and return or something. So in those environments, we have radio contact with the NPS, and we had a meteorologist sending us daily reports for weather, to be able to look as far out as possible, as reliably as possible. Reading the mountain is certainly as important as somebody giving you the numbers and figures from somewhere else. Having a strong, experienced team that's going to talk and make decisions together. Where's everybody at physically? Where's everybody at mentally? What's the situation on the ground that would dictate go or no go situations and stuff? Are we ready for a push? Is everybody, fueled up and, stuff like that. So we take those on a case by case basis. And then obviously, Denali is a big weather mountain. Weather is probably I'm not sure, it's only 50% success rate, and it's probably lower for self-guided parties, but 50% success rate annually overall on the mountain. And I imagine weather is one of the biggest reasons why people don't summit. Weather, and then the second one would probably be something that goes wrong, temperature related, not frostbite necessarily, like full on frostbite, but like some frost concern, body wears down, just breaks, as a result of relentless snow and ice. And cold, and you just kind of crumble under the weight of it all after a while, and your body's like, I just can't take this. I can't take -10 anymore. I'm just done, stuff like that. And, in the mental aspect, those three things probably put more parties off a summit bid than anything else. The cold just being, a monster factor.
Yeah.
So you're constantly in a reading state and reevaluation state on the upper portion of the mountain, like that one more specifically. And then the same goes for any other mountain. But, frankly, we always look at I think even myself, we look at things like an Everest or Karakoram, the Himalayan climb or something. And, it's so many weeks long and stuff. And, most of alpine climbing is like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Like most of what people do is 2 or 3 days. Like, you're like, you have like 1 or 2 free strides, packet of coffee, and like 5 pro bars and some goos. It's like, you can kind of get down the mountain. You're always dehydrated anyways when you're climbing. You can kind of get down the mountain with like 1 liter of water anyways. So, if you kind of mess it up, you're like, yeah, just drink out of the stream. By the time you get to the car, you won't even have dysentery yet anyways. Like, I know it's terrible advice to pass on, but it's like, look, guys, we don't have a pump. We're really pressed for time. We're running out of daylight. There's no way I'm going to have Giardia is not going to set in until we get to the car anyways. I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah.
So, it's easier to, and this is where just like I said, Denali is like a factor of 10. So like, you don't make decisions like that. You don't take chances with anything like that, but you're climbing like Mount Adams, which is 2 days in Southern Washington, 12,000 foot mountain. You're like, don't be an idiot. Don't go up when there's a storm coming.
Yeah.
Stay or go down. Always have calms. These are good rules to live by and stuff. And if you can follow those things and not be a total knucklehead, and if you don't have summit fever, which is hard to do, but if you don't have summit fever, you can pretty much keep yourself in solid territory most of the time.
Yeah. You mentioned that, so for Denali, it's always 10 times, 10x, a lot more preparation, a lot more being mindful of what you're doing. So you mentioned you did that this year. It's not something you probably would do on your first attempt. So did you specifically do a lot of training and specific things leading up to this to prepare you for Denali?
Yeah, so I did May, not this May, last May. I did May 15th to step foot on the mountain. I started training from January of that year. So Jan, Feb, March, April, and then half of May. So it's about 4.5 months. And I keep I CrossFit about 5 days a week on a regular basis. So as we progressed later, and part of my training was climbing other mountains. So I put up some, I did some winter climbing, some late winter climbing, Mount Shasta. I did some Sierra climbs, and just try to spend time in the mountains, which is obviously the best training to do, is just repetition of climbing. When I couldn't do that, I spent multiple days a week doing the following. I had a 1 mile sled drag in a parking lot with a 65-pound sled and a 45-pound backpack that I walked 1 mile at a time without stopping. Then I would do several hundred step-ups weighted, and then I would do a CrossFit workout, and then I would run. And I did this for months. And I can't underestimate how many people in the later portion of the season were fundamentally out of shape for that mountain. Now, look, it is what it is. They paid to be guided up there. I really personally don't care. They're not on my team, but I'm like, this person is not prepared to climb this mountain. Like, I'm just like, whatever. Like, and it has nothing to do with what their body type looks like. It's just like, you're suffering, like, in a way that shows that this mountain's eating you up. And it is a monster mountain that you climb almost twice. Depending on how you climb it, you probably come close to climbing it twice, because we do a single day pull of 150 plus pounds from base camp, 7 miles to camp 1 over snow. You're snow the whole time. From camp 1, you do a mid camp cache the next day. So you take half or more than half of your weight. You lug it uphill on the sled to a midway point between camp 1 and camp 2. Next day, you take all the rest of the weight from camp 1 to camp 2. Next day, you go down to the cache point and pull it back up to camp 2. And the next day, you pull it halfway between camp 2 and camp 3. And then the next day, you migrate all the way to camp 3. And then the next day, you go back down and pull up your stuff from midway camp 3 to back up to camp 3. See, doing this twice and under massive load, which we've only described 4 or 5 days of climbing, right? And so you're talking a monstrous amount of physical energy and exertion and stuff. I was in great shape when I went into the mountain. I lost 20 pounds.
Wow.
And I just say, by way of measurements, I'm 5'11". I sit at around 200 to 205 pounds normally. So I hold a lot more muscle just because of the lifting I do in CrossFit. I was down to the low 180s. And so just by way of perspective, I went in extremely good shape and still lost 20 pounds. Yeah. And I was 21 days on the mountain. And this is something else most people don't understand, is that when you're hanging out at 14,000 feet, you are slowly dying. Now, it's not like hanging out at 25 or 28,000 feet. No way. That's quickly dying. That's not slowly dying. There's nothing slow about that. But at 14,000 feet, you're hypoxic, especially when you're in the Arctic. There's just less oxygen at 14,000 than there is at the equator. You know, keto is at 12,000 feet, and plenty of people are living up there. Nobody's dying from hypoxia, but like we regularly wake up in a tent, like having to like, you know, you hypoxic, like just like laying down because your body's just not getting enough oxygen, and you're not eating enough. Your muscles are in atrophy, and you're just slowly whittling away over time. So I've told people physical preparation for that mountain is extremely high on the list because it's not an overly technical climb. The most technical part of Denali, I think, is well, again, if you're in a guided group, it's not technical at all. It's just, you know, I think maybe the running belays on the Autobahn is probably a little technical, or at least it's a bit repetitive, but you need to be smart about how you do it. And then the fixed line that goes up the head walls is something most people haven't done before. So to them, and it's a long 700-foot, 60-degree vertical climb up hard ice. So like, you know, it's not, but again, you're on a fixed line. So it's not like it's not like you're simul climbing up that, you know, with double ice axe and like a couple ice. It's like, you know, but which would be super cool, but it's not like you're doing that. So physical preparedness for a mountain, the objective of that type is really, in my opinion, outside of the logistical things like making sure you've packed enough food and you've made the right smart clothing and gear decisions. Outside of that, your physical preparedness will take you months to accumulate if you're not already extremely fit. So runners and cyclists are in great shape to already do this. The real question is, can they carry 150 pounds?
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, that's where the sled dragging comes in. And someone's like, well, how would you recommend doing this? Do a lot of running? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, run a ton. But like, you need to carry load over long distances. That is that you will carry heavier weight on this mountain. There's no Sherpa, there's definitely no Sherpas, but there's no porter supported climb. There's no porting there's no mules carrying anything. It's not Kilimanjaro.
No.
You know, it's none of that stuff. So you're carrying your own stuff, and it is really, really heavy. So physical preparedness is just you cannot underscore how important that is to the success. That is the reason our team made it. We waited out storms for 7 days at 14,000 feet, and patience and physical preparedness are the reasons we made it, because we had 48 hours to get to the summit from 14,000 feet, and we did. And then we turned and got back to 17,000 feet at the high camp up there, which is a garbage place to have to stay. And we waited out a blizzard up there and a whiteout. Then the next day we were able to climb down. And we were physically fit, strong, experienced team. And we were on the move for almost 12 hours. We were on the move for more than 12 hours on some day.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just don't move fast up there anymore. You're just not. Fast is not a thing. Fast is a word that you have stopped using a long time ago. You know, various degrees of slow.
Yeah, not true. In such a scenario, I think that will be one of the things that will be really hard to train for, is when are you still sound of mind to make decisions of going fast, especially after you're already going for 12 hours. And when do you recognize, and are you able to recognize that in others? And when do you make a call to then break off or continue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that comes with experience. I think that comes with and I say this like Denali, yeah, like you're right. Denali's not a beginner mountain. I don't care if you're going guided or unguided, guided, you know, it's not. It is a very real, very serious, very hazardous, very lethal and fatal mountain should you make any critical errors, mistakes, or misjudgments. So no, I wouldn't recommend that on anybody. But I would say absolutely, it is about experience. And also, like an elastic band, you know, you stretch yourself each time a little bit more as you experience and you take on challenges and such. Like, I would never tell somebody to do a 7-day backpacking trip through the Sierra. This is one of their early career moves. I'd be like, that is an asinine decision. That is, your body is going to break under the mileage that you're about to do, unless if you're this ultra marathon runner guy that, you know, is like, but right, we're not, generally speaking, not talking to those people, and they're off doing their own marathons and, you know, whatever. So it's tough. You know, you do frequently ride the line between speed and chaos. speed, metaphorically, speed and chaos, between moving fast and trying to make decisions and stuff. And you do put yourself in a red line position and a red line circumstance and such. And I think that just comes with experience. It just comes with knowing how to pull back that throttle. And when I train here on the ground, I do a couple of things that are maybe a little bit different than what people do. A lot of alpine training programs, or just people that just do train in their own personal lives for the alpine, talk a lot about zone 2 training, and which I agree with, and it is where you want to be for the most of your climb. But the reality is, once you're up at 14,000 feet, it's very challenging to get your heart rate down even into that zone any longer. So I incorporate a lot of CrossFit into my overall long workouts that are 40 to 60 minutes long. And I will do things that will really raise my heart rate. So I'll come in from a medium length run. Let's just say maybe it's a half-mile intervals at a time. And then I've got a bunch of step ups. But before I get to do weighted step ups, I might do a bunch of power cleans at a moderate load, because it is a very high power output movement. And my heart rate is going to spike extremely high. I will go up to 160 or 170 if I do them quickly. And if I focus on doing, let's just say 15 at a moderate load, at a pretty decent pace, I will come off of that into the step ups at 170 or 180 beats per minute. I have to then learn how to continue to move while rebalancing my heart rate. And I actually train that way on a regular basis, or burpees. Like if you do 20 burpees quickly, you're going to come out of that with a high heart rate. You're going to be like, whoa, I'm breathing really hard. Now I need to focus mentally on dialing my heart rate down, slowing it down over time. And runners learn this. Anybody that does long distance running learned this a long time ago in their early career of running. They learned how to throttle up and throttle down.
Yeah.
And so it's that throttling effect that we'll all take into account, where I could blast through big sections, tough sections, unsafe sections. Me and Jerome, one of my climbing partners, were coming down from Mount Rainier on the Disappointment Cleaver a month and a half ago or so. Great day, great summit. We were the first team down the mountain on this day, and we had a bunch of people climbing near us, but they were up higher. And if you're coming down off the cleaver portion of this, if you've ever done this climb before, you'll know that it's not particularly safe, because the cleaver is filled with medium-sized boulders and scree and talus. Really, it's more talus, but it doesn't really matter. Stuff that can fall. Doesn't, call it whatever you want. Stuff that falls. And you kind of like come down this thing, right? And then you come underneath. And so the way that and I talked about this earlier, the route changes every year. So this year, big crevasse opened up in the normal route, which is a lower portion, and you don't go right back underneath it. It actually takes you on the Ingram Direct. And so you actually have to reascend back up the Ingram Direct a little bit, and then we pop down. Just the way that things shifted, right? Totally normal. But you also go underneath these massive ice seracs at the same time. So you really don't want to spend any time here. So A, it's the end of the day. B, we slept somewhere around an hour and 50 minutes the previous night. So it's after summit. So you're already tired. You're tired. You didn't sleep a lot. That's just how you climb Rainier. It's a little chaotic, so you sleep later. And now you're at the end, which is probably one of the more dangerous portions. Less crevasse danger, but more anything that falls. And just stuff falls on mountains. Day warms up. Sun hits it. Ice melts. Things fall. Seracs fall. Rock falls on serac. Serac falls. And these are like the size of cars. So you don't want to spend any time here. So in that kind of training environment, what I'm imagining when I'm going and doing that is like, okay, I need to go. I need to move. We need to move and clear this section in 5 minutes. We need to climb at twice the pace that we are climbing right now in this section to avoid any potentially hazardous situation. Does it guarantee we're going to be safe? No. But the less time you spend in an unsafe environment means the less time you have for something to go wrong. And that's how you try and make sound decisions. So I emulate that kind of training environment. And man, my heart rate was through the roof. I'm at 11,500 feet. I've been climbing all morning since 1:45 in the morning. It's like 11 in the afternoon or 11 in the morning. You know, I barely slept. I'm tired. Jerome's tired, and we are sweating now. We are actually going into a full sweat to move through this section. And that's just what's a smart decision. So that's the kind of training environment, because you do have to climb through sections fast. And so but then how do you balance it back down, right? Like how do you climb? Because you can't be sweating the whole time. It's dangerous. You don't get hypothermia. So, you know, bad idea. So I do tend to train a lot of stuff like that. That's a little bit different than kind of what the traditional zone 2 training is, and staying in this area in this zone, because your heart rate is always over 111,000 feet. So, you know, it works for me. And I've used that to mentally prepare myself also for the slow heart rate descent, because you could stop moving, which is bad. But if you can manage to continue to move and slowly balance your heart rate out, that's a more prudent way of going about doing it. And so kind of something I've learned over the years about my body and how it works in the elevation.
Yeah.
Nice. Sorry, I had a question, but
Well,
it's out of my mind, sorry.
Another one. You've touched upon that before, which is relevant for, I think, most of the hikes. I mean, you've got it on Denali or on Mount Rainier, which is then only one day, one night. But food, when talking to a lot of through hikers, it's a lot of junk. And getting in as much, mainly sugar actually, that they're trying to get into their bodies. How is that for you? And is there a big difference between rock and snow?
Alpine rock no. If rock is just, you know, like you're usually not hiking that far, you know, if you're going to a place, and so that would be a very different circumstance. But overnight alpine rock, no, I don't find that it's very different. Cold is something you're gonna have to deal with in most environments. You know, alpine rock tends to be a little less cold, and depends. Temperature is always a consideration, but the food really doesn't make that. I don't usually make a bunch of different decisions of food based off of whether it's rock or snow. I just got back from the Grand Teton maybe 3 weeks ago, and that was very much the same type of food I climbed with on Rainier. You know, if it's going to be warmer out, though, I might bring some more real food. Like I might bring a fruit, because I just don't like frozen fruit. Like I just don't like a banana when it's frozen. Like it's just I'm just not interested in that. But yeah, through hikers and I share an affinity for candy, because one of our climbing friends, Renee, who's done the PCT with her husband, just total like climbing badass, and she's super fast, and she's got a lot of those like weight saving tricks that you learn on these mega through hikes, right? She has a problem eating at the high alpine, so she has to find foods that are really appetizing for her, because not motivated. And I can understand that firsthand. I didn't really experience until Denali, but also just sometimes summit days. If you have a snack that you like that has a lot of calories, I tell people bring it. Like if you like it, bring it. Like if you don't like it here right now, you won't eat it up there. You don't really realize how much your appetite you're not going to have an appetite. You're going to have an appetite for like hamburgers. Well, there ain't any hamburgers. You know, if you want pizza, ain't any pizza up there. So mine's Snickers. And so I learned this the hard way, because Igor is also on our climbing team. We were in Denali. He brought us Snickers a day, which, you know, isn't terrible if you're doing a 2-day climb. But he brought 25 Snickers. So, you know, it's like, oh wow, because you want to eat it and it's good cold. And so I've just kind of learned that yeah, like I experiment with a lot of food, and I encourage people to experiment with different things, but I just kind of use a couple different rules. Number one, calories matter. Okay, so just because it tastes good doesn't mean it has the calories, and you need fuel. Carbs are more important than protein. Fat will keep you full longer. So, you know, I'm using like these things. So if most of your calories are coming from carbs, good. You do need some protein, because it's just important to have it. That way, on multiple day climbs, you're not quite as sore because you're giving your body's getting protein to be able to rebuild muscles that are.
Yeah.
So you do need some protein, and that's where Snickers is. It's got high protein, high fat, high carbohydrate. It's really good. So carbs keep you moving. Proteins help you build you back, and fat keeps you full longer. That's what I tell people. I'm like, that's just to understand that from a mechanism of like why you're eating it and what it's doing. So cheese, great, gonna keep you full. You're not gonna have the hunger pains as much or as often. Cheese is fantastic. Tuna is light, comes in packets. Cheese and tuna make a nice meal. Add a tortilla and you got a wrap. That is going to keep you full a long time because the cheese has got a lot of fat. It's going to give you some protein, 16 grams of protein in a single serve tuna packet that comes in a plastic tuna packet container, and then about 35 grams of protein or of carbohydrates in a tortilla. Like, that's a decent meal. Outside of that, if you don't like it down here, you won't like it up there. So don't bring it with you. And then if you're really like a stone cold, SOB, then, you can bring some, things that you will eat, even though you don't like them. But most people aren't like that.
No.
I tell people also to skip the beef jerky because it just doesn't really do a whole lot. That's personally, I'm like, well, beef jerky is nice and tasty, but like, it's just a bunch of protein and salt. So like, if you're looking for weight saving advice, and I'm like, it'd probably be good to bring a Snickers instead because it's going to get you further and it's just going to process. You're going to get more out of it and stuff. Oh, the other thing I tell people is like, I learned this trick. I can't remember which of my climbing friends showed me this, but sleep with your food. Sleep with your food in your pocket, especially if you're climbing in the cold.
Yeah.
No one likes cold food. Cold Snickers might taste good, but it's still a pain in the butt when your mouth is dry and you're dehydrated, and it's hard to get enough saliva to melt it, and your mouth is cold and your lips are frozen and your teeth are frozen. So it's all kind of sucks. So if you're climbing in the cold, sleep with your food, put one in your chest pocket, put one in your pant pocket. When you climb, put it in your inside chest pocket and in your pant pocket, and your body heat will keep it warm. It means it just keeps it at a relatively edible temperature.
Yeah.
Always, when you wake up, always put today's snack in your pocket. It starts warming up, and in about 2 hours, it's going to be good to go. Nothing thaws out quickly in the snow. No. So, if you start when you wake up, the first thing you do when you wake up is if you have your snack, especially if you're not having a warm meal in the morning, you're just having a bar or something, eat the bar that's been next to your body overnight. Number 2, replace it with another bar. Yeah. In 2 or 3 hours, it'll be good, it'll be edible, and it'll be a snack, and at least it will taste better. And you won't have to rehydrate it with your saliva that you don't have in your mouth because you're already dehydrated. So that's what those are the lessons, the rules that I try to give people. General advice is around that stuff. Yeah.
So water is then going to be is more of an issue in mountaineering?
Well, yeah, yeah, water is a serious issue in mountaineering. It's readily available water. Now, obviously, snow is great. And you can melt snow, but it requires a lot more fuel.
So much time, yeah.
Weight dynamic between melting, and then if you get the higher up and the colder it gets, the harder it is to melt snow, and it can take a long time to do snow melts. Yeah. Generally speaking, when we climb, we do not do midday snow melts. We do it in morning and night only. So what you got on your back is what you're getting. And you just got to work through it. We are always mildly dehydrated. Not even kidding. If it's a 3-day climb, by day 2, I'll probably pee like twice.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And I'll still consume like 3 liters of water. It just is not, there's not a lot. Climbing is not a healthy sport. You are putting your body through a ton in the alpine. So if it's rock, the other situations you have to worry about are running water. So you could quickly treat water if you have drops or a filtration. Like, I love gravity filters because you can do a ton of platypus gravity filters. One of my favorite things for the high alpine, especially when you have access to running water. So if you're early season snow, no running water, you have to melt everything. Later season snow, you might have creeks and streams that you can refill at. Gravity filter is like money because you can do like 4 liters of water in 10 minutes of filtration, maybe even less than 10 minutes. You can do 4 liters of water and you're good to go. You could do drops, which is quick, and tablets. You could do UV pen. UV pen's great for like highly glaciated water, which has a lot of silt in it, which sometimes gets stuck in your filters. So UV pens are a good option, which I personally don't carry one. I don't use it, but the gravity filter is fantastic for teams as well, because you can do, one person can carry a filter and you can cover four plus liters,
sure.
3 to 4 liters at a time. And, that gets you a lot of ground. So water is a big challenge, and that is a part of the logistical of any outdoor objective is water. If you're thankfully, if you're climbing in the snow and you're in an emergency, you can always stop and melt. Like that's an option, but you do have to carry way more fuel as a result. And there's nothing worse than sitting in a vestibule in the dark, in the frozen, while it's howling outside, melting snow. That is probably the worst thing I can think of in climbing, is sitting in a vestibule, your butt is frozen because you're sitting on snow, or you're trying to find a way to get your butt on a sleeping pad or some kind, and you're sitting there and your boots are frozen and you're melting snow for your buddies. That is probably the worst thing in all of climbing. And it's dark out and windy and it feels like the mountain hates you. And everything inside of you tells you it's time to just crawl in. But if you don't do it, you won't have water for tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
You just won't.
No.
Do it sometime. So those are the great life lessons that it teaches you, just kind of being in really garbage environments that you hate every minute of, but you have to make critical decisions towards your success or failure. You may not make it, but you won't make it if you don't melt water. Melt snow.
Yeah.
That's zero chance of making it, right? So getting used to making decisions that are uncomfortable, right? And like I don't care who you are. You could be hiking 250 miles. You could be doing John Muir Trail, right? Man, day 4, you're going to be lit up. Your body is going to hate you. You are not going to want to put your boots on. You're not going to want to do it. You are going to be lazy. You're going to have a pity party. You're going to be in your sleeping bag because it's cold. You're going to think all those things simultaneously and all at once, and probably for the next 72 hours. That's probably the only thing you're going to think of. But it's getting used to making tough decisions in uncomfortable environments is the key to success in any outdoor objective. It doesn't really matter. And then, like I said, like with Denali, it's a factor of 10. Everything goes up, and if you're not disciplined in making those tough decisions, well, guess what? Guess you didn't coil your rope that night. Now it's buried underneath snowdrift that's a foot deep and it's frozen. So how are you going to tie any alpine coils in that?
Yeah.
Because you were lazy that night. Because you didn't want to do the hard work, which is coiling your rope at 14,000 feet in a blizzard. Who would want to do that? But that's what it takes, right?
Yes.
And so the next day you're paying the price for it because your rope is frozen and it's buried in wind drift. And hopefully you don't cut it walking around with your ice axe trying to find the dang thing, because you're poking around with sharp objects. This is where, that's the factor of 10. Now you got to cross a glacier with a cut rope. Woo, smart.
Yeah.
And and it's those lessons in other objectives that set yourself up for success. So Jerome and I are going to South America in January, which is my primary training right now. I'm training really hard for that. We're doing 3 mountains in 1 week in Ecuador, Cotopaxi, Antisana, and Iliniza Norte, and then flying down to Chile to climb Aconcagua, and tallest mountain in South America, just a little shy of 23,000 feet. And so we're gone for like 3-4 weeks, and arguably the hardest part of that whole climb is Ecuador, because it's 3 mountains in 7 days.
Yeah.
So when you it's those little decisions that lead you to success. And it doesn't matter if it's a summit success or another objective, because it all cascades, you know, towards good or bad.
Yeah.
That's what you learn from experience. And I think that's what you learn. That's one of the things that you don't learn. I have personally witnessed and seen this a little bit in big guided parties, because they do set you, they're invested in your success. So you're going to get hot water from them.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to melt snow on your own and stuff. And that's fine. And that's, again, you know, everybody has a different way they want to climb, but to go through those tough decisions and have to force yourself to do it is A, part of the adventure, B, part of the experience of learning, part of the experience of maturing as a climber. It's how you make decisions in the mountain that chooses whether you're going to be successful or not. There you go. It comes down to that. And then obviously skills and stuff too, but decision making is so important.
True. And how do you keep each other sane in those difficult decisions as well? Because you're with a group, and how do you make arrangements beforehand, or how do you keep each other sane in that sense?
For many years, we'd always bring a flask of whiskey, which is a really great medicine for many ills in the mountain. You know, one of which is just raises morale. I think it doesn't take much to get a little tipsy. The higher you go up. So and it's just one of those fun ways of being social. So for us, that's one thing that we definitely do is we bring, you know, a small flask for, you know, 3 of us or 4 of us, and we all hang out in the tent and have drink and talk and share. The other is humor. You're not too far, like I said, you know, you're like never too far away from this just, you know, loopy state. You don't sleep a lot. Your body's pretty beat up. You know, you're kind of the 16-year-old version of yourself all of a sudden, you know, it's like where you're laughing at stupid, dirty jokes. And, you know, the comedy we call trail comedy is like a whole nother level of bad comedy, right? You know, just think of a movie that you think is just the dumbest, stupidest, will these guys ever grow up kind of jokes. That's trail humor. That's trail comedy. I think that transcends all types of outdoor activity. Your body's just a little bit, you know, you're kind of hallucinating a little bit. You know, you haven't slept a lot.
Yeah.
Your body's yelling at you. And so everything's just kind of funny. It's kind of slap happy a little bit and stuff. And so humor is a kind of I think a cure for a lot of ills in the mountain. It also has the ability to kind of dispel fear a little bit too. You know, with something we haven't talked about is just being scared, which is real, very much so. And I have been wildly uncomfortable before, you know, and that's a part of climbing, and being comfortable in the uncomfortable is something that is important life-saving lesson as well. But, you know, and comedy has a way of, I think, making the bad nights go away. You know, nobody likes sleeping through 50-mile-an-hour winds. Kind of always feel like something's going to go wrong. So, you know, having a team that you like to hang out with, and then we all would hang out with each other on the mountain, or we would hang out with each other in person, and have just as much fun no matter what. So that's one of those areas where I think that, you know, that's a part of a big, strong climbing team, is the ability to tell jokes. And, you know, whiskey certainly helps you do that.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for advice, I would say, let it rip, and bring a flask with you. And, you know, you'll sleep a little better too. Just don't drink too much, because
That's, yeah. If we're talking about stacking things towards success or towards bad things, then yeah.
There's a balance there, you know. So that's why you limit it to just a flask. You know, you can't get that drunk between 3 people in you know, a tiny little metal flask.
Yeah. And so yeah, you're saying you go through all these hardships, which is something that be different if you're having a guided tour, but you both reach the top. You can't speak for the guided people reaching the top of, with a guided tour, but for yourself, what is it then that you experience once you reach the top after going through all these hardships and pains?
I think every climb is unique, and I do experience different things for different climbs. Some of them is relief, frankly. And I think
Yeah.
that's one that's shared amongst many. I talked about fear, and sometimes you're like, sometimes it's not relief. Sometimes it's dread, because now you have to go down and you're not entirely sure how to do it safely.
Yeah.
So you do have those. What I get out of the mountains is a number of rewards. One is just the ability to unplug. I live on the internet and in the communications world, so there's a lot coming at me, and I kind of just not reachable except on my Garmin, which has sat phone capabilities to get text messages and stuff. But I don't give the number out to a lot of people, and I just check in with some close friends and family, and that's about it.
No.
Number one, to check out. Number two, I love physical activity, and I like to challenge myself physically and personally. And so I believe in my ability to work through the problem or outwork the problem. And so there's a great sense of, I think, accomplishment in doing something that you didn't believe that you were capable of doing, or you weren't sure you were capable of doing it, even if you believed in yourself. And I'm there for the journey. I keep a personal tally of mountains that I have climbed, and it continues to grow as it grows. People ask me all the time, do you ever want to climb Everest? And I said, no, not really. Personally, it just says nothing to me as a mountain. It just doesn't. And it's for the reasons, like, I don't really hire guides, because you are 1-to-1 Sherpa ratio on the vast majority of Everest. And I don't want somebody cooking my food for me. I won't want somebody telling me where to walk. I want to figure that out on my own and be my own explorer. I look at climbing as a form of exploration. Exploration isn't just that you have to discover a new place or that you have to go into waters no one's sailed before. Exploration is a personal journey. And like the ocean, the snow changes constantly, and the mountain is there for you on this day, and maybe not for somebody else that day or on another. You may be the only person up there, and for you, that sunrise or that sunset is both earned and personal. So for me, it is a form of exploration. I just look back over the vast expanse of the wilderness and of this earth, and I just point to remote places and say, well, kind of the only way to see it is by doing it. There's no gondola to the top of Denali. There's no express train to through the Northwest Passage in the Arctic up in Canada through Baffin and etc. There's none of that. Like, if you want to see it, you got to go. It doesn't really matter if anybody went before you, because it's not about them. It's your own personal journey. So that's the kind of sense that I feel when I go to the summits. And there could be 50 people on it or none. I do it to explore. I do it to have an adventurous spirit and to want to see the world through this way. I won't be able to climb like this forever. I won't, but this is the way I get to see the world today, and I get to do those things and experience those things and push myself through those challenges and put myself through this massive effort so that I can see it. And you get to see things that you'd never be able to see, and see them, maybe the same things, but only in ways that you can only see this way, right? And so there'll come a time when I, my aged, slugged body will not carry its way up the mountain any longer, and I can see the world in different ways. But for now, this is my journey, and this is how I explore. And so when I set my sights on other objectives, I'm like, oh, it'd be really cool. It's like, dude, it would be kind of cool to do that. Like, I haven't heard a lot of people doing that before, and I've never been there, and that sounds kind of wild, and it could take like 3 weeks to complete the whole thing. That sounds cool. I'm like, that could be radical. So climbing in Antarctica would be like a really cool opportunity. Such climbing in the Arctic, because they're very remote. They're very hard to get to, and And, you know, that's the things that kind of appeal to my interest, is going to these remote parts of the world, or even like, you know, Papua New Guinea or something. You're like, okay, Carson's Pyramid, like, whoa, like that's a tough remote climb. That's like through the jungle and it's multiple weeks. You're like, oh, cool. That appeals to me. You know, taking a boat to a village to take a elephant, you know, through the jungle for 6 days, bushwhacking it to climb this thing for another 14. Like, I'm like, that's cool. That's an explorer, right?
Yeah.
That's what early age explorers were like. They're in for a journey. And that's how I see it. And that's kind of how I like to pick my objectives and such too. And they're not all like that, but you know, time to time. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really great point to wrap up the interview. And yeah, we'd really like to thank you for your time, for all the information you provided us.
Yeah.
It's been really, really insightful, and I think the followers and listeners to this would really have enjoyed it as well. Just as a final question, where are they able to follow you somewhere online to learn more if they want to?
Yeah, I usually post a lot about my climbing stuff to my personal Instagram page, which is at chalkup, CHALKUPJLO, chalkup JLO. Justin Franco. People have been calling me JLo since Jennifer Lopez got her first hit when I was in the 7th grade. So it's just stuck after that. And chalkup isn't too hard to figure out, which intersects the worlds of both CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting, and also my love for climbing and rock climbing and all things climbing, etc. So yeah, I post a lot about my climbing journeys there, cool pictures from the wild and the wilderness, etc. So you know, if you ever have any questions about alpine climbs that you've seen me do, or you know, training tips or something like that, just hit me up in DMs. I love talking about it. It's something I'm super passionate about, and love sharing more with others that are looking to get more involved, etc., etc. So I'm just totally an open book. So hit me up anytime.
Awesome, that sounds great. And then would like to wish you an amazing adventure down south.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Have a great time, and yeah, we'll definitely be sure to follow and see how that went.
Awesome. Thanks both of you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.